The deep marketplace problem is that people need to sell things they haven't sold before. They don't know whether people are going to commit to those things. And they need to work with it anyways. And the setup of the item database is cumbersome when all you want to do is speculate with these things because you're trying to build quote or some sort of solution. And after somebody commits, you just want to get into delivery, and the setup becomes this thing that slows us down. In addition, people love to work in spreadsheets as a very quick way to be able to quickly get some data in, quickly be able to do some things, work with the rows. They have a lot of freedom. So you'll see that pattern a lot. And we have seen many clients do what we call the generic item approach inside NetSuite because it's so hard to set up the item. And then they really pay a price later because they can't get costing and all these other sorts of nice statistics. So in your config subconfig pattern, and as I originally saw the client's requirements, I could see a capacity for spreadsheeting. And it looked like you've got something close, but it's a little complex to observe. And I'd like to hear how you see it.
Well, okay, so the very first thing was that the client was saying quoting is a cost center, right? It just costs you money to quote projects because you don't.
Well, that's fundamental. There's always cost incurring but remember, quoting is speculative.
Yeah.
So the question is when you're speculating, as always, you're trying to get as much done for as little cost as possible because you're hoping to get a return you don't want to waste.
Yep.
And people need to move fast in the marketplace when the competitors are coming around and moving fast around you. So you don't want to be encumbered.
Yes. So that was the original idea of why we were going to do this, to make it super fast for the quoting team and all the estimators to quote jobs. Okay. And second objectives was also to not pollute their database, right? Because you don't want to set up, again, thousands of SKUs if you're never going to sell it.
That's right.
Or even to purchase it. So to keep a clean database and to be fast, well, obviously the spreadsheet kind of capability was envisioned to solve that. Okay. And obviously there's a lot more to just like the item relationship, but what I want to show at least, and here was the original design. Okay. Yeah. We always get kind of an overall quote, and then you can break down the quote into sub quotes. Okay, that's what we call main config and sub configs. Simply because one sub config at the end of the day is the one record that transformed to a sales order. Okay, so it's on the sub config that we have all the config lines, which are item line that will need to be tied with a real item in the database when converting to a sales order.
Yeah, let me articulate it again just to make sure. A config is a wrapper of subconfigs. A subconfig is much analogous to product records as we traditionally think about them. And the beauty is you can take a config and turn them into sets, and you could actually have multiple configs having subconfigs, maybe even package them together in a group to collection, because you might organize your quotes into sections. And is that sort of the innovation?
Yeah, but also you could have different different customers, because at the end of the day they were tying in with customers, so you could have multiple customers under that same big quote. Yeah, which is why we did it this way. Okay,
so that whole vision of being able to have multiple parties in a complex arrangement of network of conversations, such as architecture and various other things, all these different parties are trying to get to this end goal, and you're not sure who's going to commit, but they're looking to you for a solution. Fair?
Exactly. Yes. The idea was every config line was going to be a freeform text kind of line item. Okay. So that's what I can show you. So here's the main config. It's a set of sub config at the end of the day. Most of the data is all inherited by the main config because we keep that synchronization between all the top and all those bottom layer. But this one again has the config lines. Now config lines, this is where you can in edit mode go in and just work just as you would do in spreadsheets. So obviously all columns are customizable. A few columns also have specific functions, just as we would have in Excel, right? They could have their own formulas and so forth. So as I can just type in, type quantities, I can then pick units, who's the manufacturer for my product, preferred vendor. So just that's a lookup. Again, fully customizable, but then that's where you reach the MPN. Okay. So for this client, what we did was we don't want them to go look around in their database and see, okay, does that exist? Does that not exist? If it does not exist, let me create it and so forth. So you just do the work. And if something exists, well, NetSuite will do a lookup and you'll find it. Okay, so for example, on line number 1, I have an item lookup right here. Okay, so as I typed in this MPN for this vendor, well, I had one item that got retrieved in the database, which is this. It exists already. All right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In other words, but you can type in and behind the scenes, it's doing the lookup so it doesn't slow you down.
Correct. So I can just type in NPN and see like that little flag. I don't know if you saw it. Whenever I tab out, well, you don't see the keyboard, but like now I'm tabbing out. So it's 1.5 seconds. It does a lookup in the database. Didn't find anything. But now let me, for example, pick this. So if I now do this, tab out. Oh, see now I have this item. I go looked up in the database.
Found it very fast if it is that. So however they got that information, they could be looking in a catalog or talking to a rep or something else. They just pop that in and voila, it doesn't matter. It finds it, finds it.
Finds it. If it finds it, well, you have the extra beneficiary of having the pricing data. So everything what is built around price level. So for this sub config, which is tied to one price level, because that's at the top, we bring it down to the line. So we see it here. And it does the lookup also on the item card to see, okay, what's the rate for that price level? What's my estimated unit cost for that vendor? So you don't even have to fill in those. If obviously you want to change it, you can definitely do it. So I can just keep going like this and say 1, 2, one of this, one each, for this. So I can work pretty fast like this. And I can also select the location from which it will be depleted.
And the description could be anything you want it to be.
Anything I want it to be when it's not looked up. Obviously, if it's looked up, you probably want to leverage what you have, right? So just fill in some blanks here and so forth. So I can always save, come back later and so forth. As I save, we run the math on, the economics of that subconfigs, then goes back up to the parent to see the overall profitability of the quote.
So, I mean, if we ever wanted to polish this, we could get a different kind of shaping and visualization of it, and we might be able to use our extensible client framework, a whole nother way of doing this. But that felt pretty easy. And then this becomes effectively the quote. So like if you want to make that, you say, okay, I want to print that out now to a customer, what do you do?
For this client, they have two scenarios. One that they want to print the detailed quote with pricing, and another one they just print the summary quote with just item name and quantity. So I have a detailed one with pricing. So, these items are not in my database, but I just, publish it on the quote.
It's beautiful. So that's great. And then I see other things there. You got like create deposit requests. So if we want to create a deposit request,
you can get money out of this sub config quote before it's even turned into a sales order.
And then I see there's a button that says item creation. What's that for? I thought you would do that at the time they commit.
If your customer agree on this, they send you a PO ready to go forward. Obviously, the next step for you is you want to transform that to a sales order. But we will restrict you from doing that as long as not all items are looked up. Okay, so now I have 2 lines that have no looked up item. Okay, so I'm not able to turn that into a sales order.
We chose to go that paradigm as part of to get to the sales order. When you get this far, now let's make it easy to generate these items.
So I click item creation, goes to Sweetlet, tell it retrieve the 2 lines that are not created yet in the database.
Yep.
I can, obviously I'm sourcing some values. I can have full, control over which columns to show up here. I can pick this up and see, let's say I just want to create the first one. Well, actually, let's just create both. So I can do this because the concept is also you don't have to create all the missing items at once. Something else that's going on let me just save it because it will go in the queue. We have an app setting. So again, fully customizable that, hard code values. Any item record field that you want to default to something, we do it in the app setting.
Yeah,
We can
in
have
other words,
logic.
we can put a lot of constants and various things to just minimize the amount of work, but get the item defined with all the richness that we want.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so my items were created. I have those items here. So if I look up the item, so as we constitute the item, we also go right in those sublists. We have this vendor with that MPN, with the cost that I said that I have on the config lines and so forth. We also fill in the selling price that I've put in the config line for that price.
The manufacturer's part number, MPN, is the key.
Is a driver. Yep.
Yep. All makes sense. Okay, I like it a lot. How do you turn it into a sales order?
First, let me put the customer in and I'm gonna submit it. Okay, every time I save, we just sync the economics. So that's why there's always a queue here. So I gotta submit it.
It looks like
they have a pretty
you're using a record state manager on the config itself. So you're verifying some various parts of the integrity, some rules.
Yes, and one of the rule is before being able to convert it, you need all items. So you would have seen it in an RSM field ruled as missing items or missing customer.
Got it. We would only get this far when we know that we're committed. We're going all the way.
Yeah. So submitted meaning they submit it to their customer. If they ever receive a PO, the next state is to say, okay, PO received. And this is where then you'll know who the customer is, because for this client, they didn't know who the end customer would be. The requester, the person requesting the quote could have been different than the customer. So now by receiving the PO, they know exactly who the customer is. They can put that data in. Everything is ready. So now I can create a sales order. Now I have access to the button right here.